She said that I get on her nerves.
Action.
Is he mean or is it Rose?
It's him who does most of the mean stuff.
Like what? Give me an example. I like examples.
Okay. Should I go with this mean?
No.
You gonna get.
Go ahead, Rose.
You gonna have to move out. She got to go.
Rose.
She just has your rent on the room.
You started.
Threaten to take it away.
All right. You know what?
The views and opinions expressed by the Real Teachers of Atlanta, LLC, are those of the podcasters and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, ideologies, or standards of any school district in any county in the United States. Any content provided by our podcasters, guests, and callers are of their opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, institutions affiliated with the local government, individuals, or anyone or anything. The podcast and all affiliated with the Real Teachers of Atlanta, LLC, are used for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome back to another episode of the Real Teachers of Atlanta. Make sure to like, follow, share, subscribe, all of the above at Real Teachers of Atlanta on all handles, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and especially YouTube, because
That's where we
live. Today, we are going to dive into something that we all hate, loathe, I'm sure. It is almost testing season. So today, we will be discussing standardized testing.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So, do you all feel that standardized testing is beneficial
Waste
to
of
a
time.
student?
Waste.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Waste of time.
I think we all arrived there so fast.
Yeah.
Episode over.
Yeah.
That's it. We hate it. It is useless.
It's a waste of time.
It's a waste of time.
It sure is.
It does not show the measure of a child's intelligence at all.
And so there's so many issues with standardized testing. So we can dive into one of them that I would like to at least present this viewpoint.
Mhm.
One of the things that we find with standardized testing is exactly what it is. It's a standard. So every single student receives the same test, the same type of testing, same environment. But we all know that when we are in our classrooms, the type of instruction that we provide is differentiated. It's almost, in a lot of situations, it's literally tailored. Whether that student is gifted or they have an IEP, we're tailoring their education, the pace in which we teach it, the tools that we use, to that student.
So why are we giving the same test to all children?
Man, if I knew the answer to that question, I would be a millionaire.
And the only reason why I'm asking that is because we know that children learn differently.
Absolutely.
Some children are more artistic than others. Some children like to draw out their answers. Some children like to talk out their answers. So when we're looking at the educational system, I have to often wonder, why are we pigeonholing our kids to only doing one type of test? What information are you trying to get? What are you doing with this data?
So the same folks that make the book are the same folks that write the text. Like the people, because it's all, like, I feel like ultimately it's politics and it's money. You know, because we also look at like, where are the lower test scores? Where are the lower reading scores? Oh, those are in our lower area, our lower economic status areas where there's less money, less funding. Regardless of how you redistrict, they use this data is used to determine like, how many teachers do you need, what type of teachers do you need, what kind of students do you have, what's their economic status. And we do know that there is a direct relationship between economic status and your education.
Right.
Students who have access to more resources are going to perform better on a standardized test because they more likely were taught at a higher level with more time that test. We prepare for that.
We have over about 486 schools in Georgia, and half of these schools failed when it came to standardized testing.
New York did as well.
Well, they use these tests to see how well. These tests say how well our students are ready for the world.
Yeah.
Where in
in a world where
and our
people
students are not going outside of the classroom, and when they get to these jobs, they don't have a pencil and a Scantron, right? So we're not giving our students real life that they can apply in real life into world real life implication. They're not able to go out and critical think because we're basing what they know off a standardized test, and I think that is so unfair.
It is. I was reading, so often I read, but I was reading an article. I said it, whatever. And in the article, they were talking about the relationship of the number of prison beds that we build in the U.S. in comparison to test scores, and talking about how where there's lower test scores, you will see, like, if the reading levels are really low, there will be an increase in prisons that are built, because they understand that if you read, the lower the reader, the increase in crime.
Yeah, there's a correlation.
That means you're going to
between
jail. You're going to be a criminal
So
because you don't have an education.
So maybe I,
Right.
said my point early. Maybe I didn't articulate
No,
that
I
correctly.
agree.
But there are 486 schools in Georgia, and half of those schools are in poverty. Like, those are impoverished communities. So,
Impoverished or underfunded?
well, they want to say what statistics show impoverished. Okay, so like you said before, if they don't have access to these resources, then they're not going to be successful when it comes to these standardized tests.
Because education isn't equitable, and that's
Well, yeah, and
we
that's
talk
what they're-
about that all the time.
Right. We often talk about giving students the same opportunities that other students have, but I think the reality is that if you're going to have a student take any type of standardized test, is to create data so that you can say, hey, let's build more libraries in this particular area. Let's build more community centers for students
Right.
who don't have access to the internet. That's what you're supposed to do.
But instead we
with
build prison.
But instead we build
increase the
prisons.
number of prison beds.
Well, I mean, it's a great
Because
investment
you can't-
for certain people.
Yeah, of course it
People
is.
invest in these
Yes.
type of facilities. So
They're preparing, and the thing
yeah.
is, parents need to realize that we're preparing. The government is preparing. The
mhm.
penal system is preparing for your child, and they're in the 3rd grade taking their first standardized test.
Oh yeah, they look back at your
Well, they're
child's.
doing it before then.
Oh,
Yes. I think
even
your first
kindergarten.
standardized test is 2nd grade in Georgia.
Yeah.
So
So in 2nd grade in
the
the state of
course,
Georgia, they're determining you aren't on grade level, you're going to prison.
over
Right.
the course of a child's education time, they're gonna have over 100 standardized tests.
Yeah.
And for what? Because again, when they get into the real world, you're not using these applications, and you might say, well, we're comparing it to other countries. I've taught probably touched every student around the world.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
in
And,
some form or fashion, absolutely.
in some form or fashion.
Yeah. Everybody is. I think we're what? We close.
Shoot,
We
you can
getting
get
close
close.
to the
It's
goal.
But just to tap in, I get a chance to see and talk to a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people around the world, where you have Finland, statistically, Finland
Kicking,
and Korea are kicking our butts, right, when it comes
dragging
to
you.
the education system. They're kicking out
So
our
what is
butts.
it that they're doing? What is?
Well, what are they
happening?
doing? Right?
Right.
Okay, so let's tap into it. What are they doing? So they focus,
Mhm.
right? So they are doing these tests just as well as we're doing. They're doing
Okay.
standardized tests. But what separates them from you and I? They have smaller class sizes.
Yep,
There we
right?
go. Here we go.
Oh.
They implement real life situations so
Mhm.
their kids can apply themselves outside the classroom.
Right.
Now Korea, hands down, South Korea, they killing it, right?
And
Mhm.
technology for sure.
Well, I've been in a class online where I got a 2-year-old sitting in front of me because they have this test they have to prepare. Now, this test they have to prepare for, this, will determine if they will go to college and succeed in life.
At
right?
2 years old.
At 2.
At 2 years old, they start practicing for this big exam
At 2.
that they,
And our kids
got-
can't even feed that damn.
got the little
That's
baby, got the look with the headphones
Can't
on.
even half walk.
And
That
it's not, the Chinese community do it too. If the baby's sick or whatever, they're learning. So they're
Mhm.
encouraged to take outside classes. They pay for these tutoring. They spend so much of their money. Everybody's on the, whether you're poor or rich,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to education in South Korea, everybody is on the same playing field.
Mm.
So
You heard that?
yes, they
You
are
mean
out.
equitable?
So they have
Mm.
more children going to college, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But let's look at the statistics when it comes to suicide rate, right?
Yeah.
The pressure because there is so much pressure that you're saying, I have to pass this test, I have to do well on this test. This determines my future. Korea has a more higher suicide rate than the United States.
Okay, so there's a trade-off.
So it's a trade-off. And that's why we don't need to start comparing when it comes to standardized tests of Finland and South Korea, because again, South Korea has a higher suicide rate because this test determines how well off I'm going to be in life. This determines if I'm going to be successful. That's just not fair.
I think that's a great point. I like that you pointed that, like you put both of those together. I didn't think of it that way, honestly. And I guess I can understand, because I think when you come from a household where education is really important and your parents do put a big, like, they emphasize, hey, you need to do well. You have to do these things, like you need good grades, blah, blah, blah. I can understand like what the stress is like. I think in a Black household, to be honest, it's always kind of in the back of your mind, like I've got to do well, because otherwise, like I have to do better anyways. Like I always remember my mom always telling me things like that. But when you think about the other part that you mentioned, everybody has this opportunity. Everybody's going to take this test. The government's going to pay for everybody. Like everybody's getting access to the resources, to the instructors, to whatever they need in those countries. And so the equitable part to me is what I think is what the U.S. needs to adopt is standardized testing. I don't think that's really the problem. I don't like how it's handled, but give the kids an opportunity to pass. Give them an opportunity to get what the next kid has. You know what I mean?
No, they did. They implemented No Child Left Behind.
Okay.
So they are.
But all they did was leave more kids behind.
Well, yeah, I know. Right. We know. I'm just saying.
But yeah, that was.
At the end of the day, I think people know what needs to be done to properly educate a person in any decade. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But, this may be an unpopular opinion, but you need workers.
And they're not.
You need workers.
They're not teaching, and that's what I'm saying. They're not teaching. We're not teaching the kids how to become entrepreneurs. How to become people that are going to be employed.
No, it's not. We're not teaching critical thinking.
Because that's not the goal.
Well,
the goal is we don't want you to have independent thought. We want you to follow instructions. Think of our school systems, the rules. The way that the schools themselves are not designed for you to have to think. Your hallways are straight. Walk straight down the hallway. Walk on this side of the hallway. Walk on that side of the hallway. If you're on the opposite side of the hallway, you're going to get in trouble. What happens if you get in too much trouble? You're going to the hole, If you get in worse trouble, solitary confinement. Whatever I don't know. I've never been in jail, so I don't know. But the point is, like, the concepts are the same. I remember, like, I don't know if y'all have ever been down there, but, like, Douglas High School down in Atlanta, like, it didn't even have windows, and everybody calls it prison. Like, that. I remember my father telling me about that.
We didn't know what the weather was like until lunch.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have windows.
My school,
that's insane.
But if you go to more affluent areas, there's windows.
There are windows.
My high school, we had windows.
Why are you preparing the kids
for a world where you can't see outside? Because when you sit in a cubicle, you can't see outside. Oh, shoot. No, you can't say that part.
Right. We're talking about creating an environment for children to be free thinkers. But when you
sit in this cylinder brick room,
when you train teachers, I mean, I think all teachers have gone through some type of training, whether that be an undergrad or after you've gotten hired to become a teacher. And we're all taught to teach the same way. Yeah. And if you don't teach this way, then you're going to fail this program. And I think it's important for educators to be, different in how they, or not afraid, fluent in how they teach and instruct students. But it doesn't matter, because now they are pushing the differentiated strategies, but the test is not different.
Correct.
So there's, were you finished? There was a TED Talk. I think her name was Nikki Adela.
Yep. I saw that one. Yes.
And she talks about her and her peers. They were, I think, in the Pennsylvania.
Something like that.
I could be wrong. What school system? It was a school system up north. But anyway, she goes into and she talks about standardized testing, and
Yeah.
she talks about how her and her peers pretty much got into the community and doing work, right? Because they're not going to have a Scantron and a pencil
Mhm.
on the job. So, definitely, if you have not heard this TED Talk, it was
I'll
amazing.
find a link and put it on there. I'll
Yes,
find a link
it
and
was
put it on there.
definitely amazing.
So
But
check the
she
description.
really digs in. I think it was Philadelphia. She digs into how she was a student at that time, and I think it's very important to have students talk about this because our students are not making they're not lawmakers, and so she really digs in deep about how that coming to school taking a test doesn't this shouldn't
That shouldn't define
what I'm going to be. And let's keep it funky. We're in the class.
That's right.
Kids ain't taking no tests. They sleeping.
Okay. So that's what they're gonna do on the job. One thing I tell my kids is I think my sad. My brain is too
that's
full
what I'm
in that
saying.
though.
These factors play a part. So
Yes.
you cannot just take these grades and base this on
anything. But this is what
mastery of a particular.
right. But let's talk about
they sleeping.
because
It could be
right.
cold, or I'm just not doing it.
Yep.
And
When they don't want, I do it tomorrow.
But we talked about the curriculum before, and what's that word y'all use? It's antiquated.
It's antiquated. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
in it. Yeah, it's not even in there. The
there's-
stuff that's learned that we do in real world, they don't have it.
It's boring,
It
right?
is, as
So,
hell.
and when
Yes.
I come to this test,
When we
Christmas tree.
Yep. Look, when we let me tell you how bad it is. You can there's these kids now. You can give them the answer, and they was
Hey, I'm done.
Yes. Oh my God. We
Yep.
had, how many
I'm
times did
finished.
that happen? We had to put in times. We give the test, give them the test, give them the answer, and they still get
10
it.
minutes top.
What?
Done.
No name.
Care?
You don't care? No, they don't. But I was gonna say this. In my brain, I'm like two-sided to this thing, right? Because y'all know I love numbers and data. I do think that there is a place. I do. But whatever. But I do think there's a place for data because you want to understand. I don't think that the data that we
That's
receive
why
from
you give the
standardized
formative and some of the
and that's it.
assessments.
And that's what I was gonna say. I don't think that standardized testing is necessarily the right way. However, I understand written down, what they said it was for, right? If we were using standardized testing for what it was stated it was for, and ensuring that we were giving an adequate, fair, and high level education across the board and across the U.S., because that was the whole purpose of Common Core curriculum, which we are now testing. And when you see, hey, school A over here, they're outperforming everybody, and school B over here, they're below everybody. Why don't we get school A and communicate with school B? Bring these some folks together, have a conversation, and let's see what they're doing over here and what they're doing over here. Is it a community thing? Is it a resources thing? Is it a money thing?
Money.
But that's what I'm saying. But
dollar bills, y'all.
Correct. But
It's
the right
about
conversation
money.
would have been helpful, and I feel like that's the miss. When you could take your two classrooms, right? If they were in two different schools, you taught the same content, and your students are doing well, all things being equal, and your students were not. The first thing, based on standardized testing, what it was designed for would mean that the two of you would come together and have a conversation and share knowledge, and we should see an increase.
Let me stop you right there.
That's what it's supposed to be
Let
for.
me stop you just right there because the teachers are not sharing knowledge.
We don't. They
have
don't. Oh my
low
God, no, they
key-
don't.
I have low key
Gatekeeping teachers.
I have
Yes,
the
you're
low
right.
key. I have seen where teachers are in low key competition
With each other.
Right,
Why? I
I've
don't
seen
know.
it, and I try to act like I don't know what's going on. Right? But I'm like, why are you asking about this other teacher about what the students' grades look like on this end for us? Because you're low key in competition, but I'm acting, I'm gonna act like I don't know what's going on.
But
And
I think that's part.
And I think it, and that's another thing, like, we've seen the horror stories in the past about these tests, and I think it creates an anxiety for not only the teachers, but it creates
For the
anxiety
students.
for the students. Because I've had students that do just, not only standardized testing, but testing period. But I mean, we can't get around testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it does create an anxiety when you are that teacher in the classroom and you know that there are some tests that Georgia Milestone, that we have to, make sure our kids
Or
perform
math testing and
well
STAR,
on,
yeah.
because you're going to be looked at. It creates an anxiety for you, and it takes the fun out of teaching inside the classroom.
Do you think that
Because
teachers
you're more,
pass that anxiety
you're
on
more
though?
Pass the anxiety
Test
on
yeah.
to who?
The students,
students.
because I remember, like when we had those tests, we're all we used to,
Yes, you
there's
have
a
to
whole
finish,
it passes
absolutely.
it on-
We
yeah.
pass that anxiety on to our students because at one point, I know across the country, students or teachers were paid predicated
Yeah.
upon their students' test scores.
Yeah.
So I mean, teachers
that still
do
happens in some smaller
all
districts.
types of nefarious things.
Yeah,
I remember I
the
had
whole cheating scandal in Atlanta.
well, yeah, because I mean, it's like you're desperate.
Yeah.
I mean, to a certain degree, it's like, can you blame them? Because
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
you know,
yeah.
of course, it's a
moral
ethics
thing,
and a
ethics,
moral
yeah.
and integrity thing that's obviously wrong with sharing answers.
correct, telling them the answers.
Right, that's not
yeah,
right.
Sure.
That is not right to do.
Right. Don't
but
do that. Do not
please don't
share
do
your
that.
tests. Don't do that.
please don't do that.
But I get what you're saying.
But just to go back to your point, it does create an anxiety with the teachers, and then you're passing it on to. You better make sure that you get the right answer.
and
You
you're
know,
stressed.
I had a teacher. This is a long time ago.
How long?
It was a while ago.
ED.
Not Edie.
Yeah.
Okay. And he asked me. He said, "This is what anyway." Another school I was teaching at.
Not yesterday, but prior to this.
It was
A
a
long
bad
time
school. It
ago.
really was. And I had some kids that were performing well on the test.
Mhm.
And he was like, can you send me all of the kids that are doing well in your class? This is like really early on in my teaching career. And so I was like, okay, I'm not thinking anything about it. And then I had another teacher come and say, he wants your kids so that his scores can be higher.
I've seen that too.
And I said, oh my God. So I talked to him. I said, hey, you're not getting any of these high performing kids. They're staying with me. He's like, oh yeah, no, I don't want you to think that. I was like, yeah, I know what you're doing. We're not doing that.
They do it.
They're staying in this
They
class.
do.
That is crazy.
So
And
I
that's
had
what I'm
that
saying. That's
scenario
what
happen
goes-
to me
That's
though.
what I'm saying. What goes back with
Right.
teachers being in competition with other teachers, because
Mhm.
this testing things kind of drive some teachers crazy.
So kind of the opposite scenario. So I had kids that I took and moved to a gifted class. Took our starting off standardized test. Take one in the beginning. So I took the first one, and based on their scores, I was like, you would be better served after that test and a few other assessments. I was like,
Right.
you'd be better served in a gifted class or
Because
an accelerated
gifted
class.
testing is
Different.
You need to assess whether or not your students
Correct.
are going to be bored.
So I was like,
yes.
These set of kids need to go to this other teacher.
Okay.
Had their okayed it with the parents, had their okayed it with administrators, had them moved. When I told someone else on my teaching team that I was doing this, they were like, that you're not going to be like bonus or whatever eligible because your test scores are going to go down because now your scores are only going to be based on the kids that you have left that didn't go well. So
instead of you doing what was right for the kids,
they were literally saying, I don't know if you should, discouraging the decision.
Yeah.
And I was like, this isn't supposed to be about me. I thought this was for them. So okay, if they're not in this class, I now have 8 kids not in the room. I can focus on who's left. Now they found 9 more kids. That's
Right.
However, that's like, oh, she got room. But in my mind, I was like, the kids, some of them didn't want to go, and I was like, listen, this is not the class. This class is not the class that's supposed to be geared toward what you need. You'll be better served here. And I just felt like that's the right thing to do. So I don't like the idea of us being paid for performance.
Right.
Well, I ain't seen the check, and
Yeah,
I know.
Do they still do that?
I've had.
You don't want me to answer that on camera. We'll talk after that.
Got it. Okay.
But a lot of private and charter schools are not held to, to
Mm.
do all. I mean, they
You know why?
They do have testing in their own right.
Yes, they
right?
do.
But they do have more project-based assignments too.
And I guarantee
Well,
their
and
scores are
how
better.
are private schools and charter? Well, how are private schools funded? Who?
Well,
There's
private-
a tuition, right?
Well, private is funded by tuition, but
Okay.
charter schools, I think, is funded by the state.
Yeah,
Okay.
charter schools are still state, but they have.
It's not public school though.
No, I mean, they fall up under their own guidelines.
Yeah, they have
Most
different
charter
guidelines for
schools
charter
focus
schools.
on different things.
Right,
yeah.
For us, the public. And,
Mhm.
again, their students may do, I've taught at private. And, of course, we didn't have to do the Georgia milestone. We
Right.
had our own standardized testing, but
Because the Georgia milestones probably would have been beneath y'all at prep school.
you think so?
Yeah.
I do. I honestly think so because just to hear you talk about private school and the few people that I do know that utilize private schools for their students, in a private school setting, I feel like the education is almost it's so much more individualized that those students' needs are met more regularly
Well,
than they,
everybody-
you know what I mean?
Well-
Because in a public school and private school teachers, and this is my opinion with zero private school experience, right?
Mhm.
That in private school setting, it seems like, yes, those teachers have their own set of issues, but they miss some of the bureaucracy things that we deal with because we're governed by the government and district education standards, right? So when the district tells us to do something, it's one thing, but if I'm just dealing with a private school with 500 kids, it's just parents, it's a little bit different, in my opinion.
In private school, we push the education back on the students.
I love that.
It's
Wow.
hands-on. Like, I'm the, I've never been a great test taker, but that didn't, say, hey, this is what you're gonna be in this world, So I'm not a person that believe in a test measures what you're capable of
I
doing.
agree with that.
And but go back to that, I think the private school, it's more open to what we can teach in that classroom. We're not having to go to this curriculum and do exactly what you
because
said.
because the government isn't funding private school.
Correct.
Either they're the parents. The parent involvement is so important, and when you start to pay for your kids' education,
you better know I'm coming.
I mean, parents do the best that they can. So if you have to, I came up through public school. I went to private school for a little bit, but it just didn't work out. I prefer to be, with a bigger group of kids. But when parents are actively paying for their child's tuition, then you have a little bit more wiggle room on what your child is able to learn, and you're able to learn more critical thinking assignments. You're able to complete more project-based assignments that students are going to actually use in the real world.
And as a parent, if I'm paying any bill I pay,
Right.
period, I need to know the ins and outs. Buy my house. I was the amount of research I did to buy a house, right? You think I'm not going to do more research to put my child to school? I'm going to know your test scores for the last 700 years before I'm going to stick my pride and joy in your classroom.
I mean, you get what you pay for.
Exactly. And if I got to pay tuition like some of these
But it's
private
not
schools
fair
charge, I'm
because
doing it.
every child deserves a proper education.
There you go.
Every child deserves a proper nutritional options. Yes, it's changed a little bit, but let's be honest, the type of breakfast that the kids eat, and that's another topic.
It goes together.
It all goes together because it's
push them full of sugar and sit in the class and then say, why you ain't sit down? Why you can't sit down, little Julie? Because I had 2 donuts and chocolate milk.
Not donuts. Not in the plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I just
It all goes hand in hand.
I just don't think that a person should be measured by a test.
Yeah.
Again, I wasn't a good test taker. It got all the way up to my senior year. Story time. Got all the way up to my senior year, and we had an exit exam.
Yeah,
you mean to tell me
graduation.
4 years of college, I got to go have a test to say I can exit out this math.
So my math, your language.
had passed everything on my exam but that math. I got up to my last semester of my senior year. If I had failed this math, so the pressure is on. But remember, I told you I work well up under pressure.
Right.
However, the pressure is on. If I don't pass this math,
That one test.
your girl don't walk. Huh?
Wow.
Now imagine how my mom, would been.
I feel you, because that's how it was.
But I got a
was
tutor. Whoop whoop. And I
She
did
passed
pass,
it.
but I'm just saying that and here I am, had far beyond reach
Right.
educational goals. But I'm just saying, I just don't feel like we should be in this box
Yeah.
where
Mm-hmm.
a standardized test measures
What
your
you
success
So
in life.
going back to it, is it about money? Because
Yeah,
I mean, you're
standardized
looking at
testing
the
is-
standardized, the person who's creating the test, and you have
Mhm,
the
McGraw-Hill.
documents that are being produced. So I mean, at the end of the day,
not the
Well, as a
documents, the
parent,
test
right?
books.
It
yeah,
does.
that's what I mean.
As
The
a
textbooks
parent-
that they sell them back to the district to teach them how to pass the test. McGraw-Hill.
Anyway,
But as
Call
a,
it-
you
call
know,
it out.
as a parent,
Yeah.
you forget and you get caught up in these type of things. When you're looking for your child to go to a school, you're looking
Yeah.
at these test scores.
right.
Oh, this school is doing very well on their test.
Mm-hmm. We're not gonna talk about how they raised the price of the houses around those
Stop
schools.
doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So many things are tied to that.
Because now, hindsight, looking back, I've contradicted myself about doing that. Oh, they have great test scores. This is the school. No, stop doing
Stop.
that.
And you
Because
know what? It's
so many factors play in that.
correct, but we'll go back to we do recognize that higher test scores, and I'm not aside from the other junk people doing the foolishness, but higher test scores, especially if they're consistent from the same school or same whatever, usually is going to also result in higher housing costs, smaller classroom sizes,
Mm-hmm.
better quality teachers because they can afford it, and more teachers.
Better,
But better resources.
That piece you said, classroom
Sizes
sizes.
and resources, and those are gonna be again. I go back to when we were looking for our home. We looked, and the number one thing we talked about, me and my husband, was educating our kids because
Mhm.
we knew we wanted our kids to have the best opportunity we could afford to give them, and that was the number one factor as to where we moved. And at the end of the day, looking back, because like I said, I moved before I became an educator, and once I became one, I was like like you, I was like, maybe that wasn't the right way to go
look
about
at it, to
it.
assess the
However, do I regret the choice of where I set my children? No.
Mm-hmm.
But now I realize, because I didn't work where my kids were at,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was like, my eyes were even more open
Mm-hmm.
at the disparity and the difference in resources. Because I'm like, my kids got top notch. The stuff in the closet was better than the stuff I had. The stuff my kids weren't even using because they had better
It's
stuff
all
was better than the
about
stuff that I
the
had
money.
because my
What
stuff
did you
didn't
say?
work.
What did you say?
The money.
The housing market.
The
So if
housing
you-
market,
if you
because that's
are-
my taxes.
That's your tax money. So that
And
tax
the more money that
is-
house costs, the more taxes I'm going to pay.
and
the
it's
more
going
to that
toward
education.
funding the resources that your child is going to use. And it's again, it's not fair. A
It's
child
not.
has nothing to do with where they live. They don't pay bills. They don't
Nope.
work. But if
And that's your
everything
future
was-
of tomorrow.
yeah,
Don't forget that.
and if everybody was afforded the same opportunities, now again, who's going to do
Who
certain
gonna work?
jobs?
It's
Who's
hard.
who's gonna do these certain jobs that other people don't want to
Right,
do?
and it's
If you
hard
don't
to tell
have-
somebody they got a master's degree to flip burgers.
Well, some people do.
They
Some
do.
people do have master degrees and flip burgers.
You're right.
All right.
Okay.
At the end of the day, so close. I'm gonna let you. She'll make you do it. At the end of the day, I think we need to get back exploring real life applications for what our kids can do
Mm-hmm.
outside of testing, because just to keep it funky, I don't even remember half of the stuff that
Hello.
I did in high school. Now I remember, a lot of things in high school when it came to English because I was interested in that. I
Mhm.
became a language arts teacher.
Right.
Not off the bat,
Mhm.
but I wish I would have had more entrepreneur classes. That's
Mhm.
we just don't teach a whole lot of that. We teach a whole lot of what you need
Follow
to do to
instructions.
pass this test, and like I said, and the kids are bored.
Well, it's crazy that we teach them to follow the rules and do what they're told, and then we say, "Why don't you think critically? Think outside the box." Well, you didn't teach me how to do that.
Sit down, do
That's
your
it.
work, and
That's
take your
it.
work
On
assignment.
time.
That's what we sound
And
like.
not a minute late. And
Well, some of
then,
us do, but yeah.
but from a kid's perspective, that does sound crazy. Think outside the box. Do everything I told you to do.
You
Those
haven't-
two
you
things
haven't
don't
told them
exist
how to
together.
really count money, how to balance a
They
checkbook.
don't even know
How
what
to
half of
open
half
up a
is.
check account, what steps it takes to be an entrepreneurship.
Nope.
Now for the schools that are tapping in and breaking
Kudos
their
to them, yeah.
cycle,
Watch the difference.
awesome, kudos to
Watch
you.
the difference.
Yes, watch the difference because you're teaching the learners how to be critical thinkers above everything.
Anything else, yeah.
I think that's most important.
I think that if learning is fun, because the every scenario from high school and middle school, I think for me that sticks out. Yes, they were like you're saying, your memories really surround language arts. Mine really surround my maths and my sciences. But they all involve something I was doing with my hands or an experience I was having that allowed me to determine the outcomes
And that's how kids
and make
learn.
things happen, and they were tangible.
I remember I was doing a dissection with some kids, and it was a certain class that was really busy. I'll just say they were busy. And another teacher said, "Are you going to do the dissection with them?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I am, you know." And she was like, "I don't know if they should be around sharp objects or blah, blah, blah." Anyway, make a long story short, out of all 4 classes, that class was the best class. Because what I realized with them is it was hard for them to copy something down. This is really early on in my teaching career before I start, differentiating strategies and doing things for different. I used to have kids all just sit and take notes. But for them, they had to work with their hands. They had to, work with the community. They had to do group work. And that was the best. They were quiet. They were working. So I think just a tip for teachers, if you do have a class that's really busy, give them something to do. Give them a hands-on activity.
Yeah.
Kids, all of them don't want to sit in front of a screen and copy down notes all day. That is boring.
It is.
Give them something to do. So yeah, I'll just say it before we wrap up the show.
Yeah, I agree. I was a busy kid for anyway.
So, holler at us. Let us know, how do you feel about standardized testing? Now that you have a tad bit of what it is, how do you feel about your child taking standardized testing? How do you feel as a teacher implementing?
Do you opt out?
Can you?
Yes, you can opt out.
Did I know that?
You can opt. Now I know during COVID you could opt out.
You can opt out regardless. You can opt out. There is a form. I'll link it.
We'll put that information down below.
Parents have the opportunity to opt out of standardized testing. But they don't publish that. They don't publicize it because the schools, if your child, especially because parents who are high flyers, the school doesn't want your really smart kid to opt out because I don't get your scores, and which means that my scores look lower.
Well, maybe we'll tap back into
Oh,
this
okay.
subject.
Part 2.
Yeah, part 2.
We're gonna talk about the opt out
We wanna-
and how we should really talk about. I can show y'all the data of it. It is crazy.
We're gonna tap back into it
we might.
because this is definitely a conversation to have. But we want to thank you for listening in on us and tapping into the conversation. You can find us on all social media platforms with the handle Real Teachers of Atlanta. Thank you. See you next time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.